I sat there smiling while my son laughed at his own joke, not knowing he'd just sealed his fate. Why waste money on someone who's almost done, he said, loud enough for the waiter to hear. The steak on my plate went cold. The wine in my glass turned bitter. And by the time the check came, I wasn't mourning his cruelty. I was rewriting my will. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Dinner turned into something else entirely. The late September sun had just begun to fall behind the rooftops, casting amber light across the bay windows of Harbor Grill. The place wasn't fancy, but Maggie liked it that way. Polished wood floors, old jazz standards humming through the speakers, the soft clink of glasses and silverware. It felt like somewhere people still said please and thank you. Somewhere people celebrated things that still mattered. She'd worn the navy blouse Dana gave her last Christmas, a small reward to herself. After 28 years and more sacrifices than she'd ever say out loud, the mortgage was paid off. The house, the one they all grew up in, the one she fought to keep, was finally hers. Here's to burning the last bank letter, Maggie said, raising her glass of Pinot. Sophie, sweet and attentive at 22, clinked gently. To you, Mom. You did it. Even Dana, the oldest and most skeptical, cracked a smile. Not bad for someone who still handwrites checks, Maggie laughed, the lines around her mouth deepening. Hey, habits keep me grounded. Only Ryan didn't lift his glass. He sat with his arms crossed, fork idle, pushing half a baked potato around the plate like it had personally offended him. This whole thing's kinda unnecessary, isn't it? He muttered, not quite under his breath. Maggie didn't look up. She reached for her water. Ryan kept going. I mean, throwing a dinner over a paid-off house? At your age? What's the point? The word struck harder than the volume suggested. There was no laughter, just a brittle pause, like everyone felt something delicate tip slightly off balance. Dana chuckled, trying to bridge it with sarcasm. What, you want her to save it for the funeral fund? Ryan smirked. Why waste money on someone who's almost done? Even the restaurant's noise seemed to dip for a second, like the world leaned in to hear the echo of what he'd just said. Sophie's voice cut through the silence, low and trembling. That wasn't funny. Maggie finally looked up, eyes calm, lips tight. It's all right, she said. But her voice wasn't warm, it was practiced, the same tone she used to soothe customers when they were too rude to deserve kindness. She reached for the check without blinking. Donna opened her mouth to argue, but one glance at Maggie's face made her stop. Maggie laid her card down gently. Let's just enjoy the night. Right, Ryan muttered, leaning back. Big celebration. No one answered. Maggie took in the table, the half-eaten steak, the shrimp Dana ordered without checking the price, Sophie's trembling jaw. She noticed how Ryan still hadn't taken off his jacket, like he hadn't really intended to stay. The waiter returned, cheerful, oblivious. Will this be on one card? Yes, Maggie said quickly. Dana started to reach for her purse, but Maggie caught her eye with a firm shake of the head. They finished the meal in silence, except for the faint scrape of silverware and the distant hum of Nina Simone, singing about lost love. When they stepped outside, the sky had deepened to plum, parking lot lights flickering on one by one. Maggie pulled her shawl tighter, breathing in the salt air. I'll call you tomorrow, Sophie whispered, hugging her. Of course, Maggie said softly, brushing a hand through her daughter's hair. Dana kissed her cheek, then gave Ryan a pointed look before turning to her car. Ryan lingered, hands in his pockets, not apologetic, just annoyed, like a man who felt misunderstood for saying what everyone was supposedly thinking. You know, he said, you always take things too seriously. Maggie didn't answer. He shrugged, turned, and walked to his truck without looking back. She stood alone in the yellow light of the restaurant's awning, watching the shadows stretch across the lot. From her purse, the receipt fluttered slightly in the breeze. She didn't look at the total. That wasn't the cost that bothered her. What echoed in her mind wasn't the number. It was the smile on his face when he said it. And for the first time in a long time, Maggie felt something stir that had nothing to do with sadness. Something colder, sharper. 2 days later, the house was quiet except for the faint buzz of the overhead light in the den. A light Ryan always said was too dim, and Maggie never bothered to replace. She sat at the oak desk, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back, half-drunk tea going cold beside her mousepad. A thick accordion file sat open in front of her, its paper tabs faded and brittle. She ran her finger over each one, reading every label like a name on a gravestone: taxes, mortgage, vehicle, estate. Her fingers paused on the last tab. Ryan, 2012. The handwriting was hers, still neat back then, hopeful even. She pulled the file slowly, like something might bite. Inside, old documents slid forward: power of attorney forms, property title copies, and a forgotten joint checking account opened back when she thought giving her son more access might help him feel responsible. She scanned the account number, the print barely legible from being photocopied too many times. Signatures: Maggie L. Shaw, Ryan D. Shaw. Her pen tapped the line under his name. Once that line had meant trust. These days, it felt like a liability waiting to happen. She reached for her phone. Carl Benson, came the voice on the other end. Warm, gravelly, and always 2 steps ahead. It's Maggie. A short pause. Didn't expect to hear from you so soon after the payoff. Thought you'd be celebrating. I did, she said. Then I started opening files. Ah, he said, with the kind of knowing sigh only someone who dealt with family paperwork for 30 years could give. Tell me what's on your mind. I need to do some pruning, she said quietly. Carl didn't ask questions. Come in Friday morning. I'll block the hour. Maggie hung up and sat still for a moment, the weight of those simple words, I need to do some pruning, settling deep in her chest. She slid the file into a fresh manila folder and labeled it in ink. Ryan. Revoke. Replace. Footsteps approached. Ellen stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs, steam curling up from both. I figured you'd still be back here, her sister said, setting a cup down. Smells like you're cooking up war plans. Maggie gave a wry smile. I'm reorganizing. Ellen looked at the chaos. Old manila folders spread across the desk. Her laptop opened to a pension management login. A half stack of legal envelopes she hadn't opened in years. You've got receipts older than his maturity, Ellen muttered, picking up one of the bank printouts. He still has his name on that second account, Maggie said. And I never changed the beneficiary on the life insurance. Ellen raised her brows. He'll find a way to drain it before you're even cold. Maggie didn't laugh. She reached for a binder she'd set aside earlier. It was brand new, bright cranberry faux leather, still stiff when she opened it. With neat, deliberate strokes, she began adding labeled tabs: legal, health, property, retirement, trusts. Last one, her hand hesitated. Then wrote, letters. What's this one? Ellen asked. Maggie slid the binder toward her and smoothed her hand over the cover. In gold lettering, the title read, New Beginnings. Ellen nodded slowly. About time. They worked in silence for a while. The only sound the quiet shuffle of papers and the occasional creak from the old chair as Maggie leaned back to cross-check dates. She moved differently now. Not rushed, not flustered. There was purpose in each page she turned, each outdated form she flagged. This wasn't the kind of revenge that came in shouting matches or slammed doors. It was quieter, smarter, permanent. By the time the clock hit 1:13 a.m., the den looked transformed. Like an office before trial. Maggie rubbed her temples and stood, stretching her back. You sure you want to do all this alone? Ellen asked, watching her. I'm not alone, Maggie replied, eyes steady. I've just stopped pretending certain people are with me when they're not. As she clicked the desk lamp off, the glow from her laptop lingered behind her. The screen showed one open browser tab. Can I revoke power of attorney without informing the other party? Friday morning was gray. The kind of gray that flattened everything. Sky, sidewalks, even the cars parked outside the red brick office where Carl Benson practiced law for 42 years. Maggie walked in at 9:02 a.m. sharp. Her cranberry binder was tucked under her arm, hair pulled into a clean twist, and she wore the black blazer Ellen always said made her look like a senator. She didn't smile at the receptionist, just gave her name and waited by the window, eyes on the slow crawl of rain over the glass. Carl greeted her himself, tall, silver-haired, suspenders visible under his open tweed jacket. Maggie, he said, offering a steady hand. Let's get to it. His office smelled faintly of cedar and copy toner. She took a seat across from him at the conference table, laying the binder between them like evidence. "You've been busy," he noted, flipping through the tabs. "I've been stupid," Maggie corrected. Carl adjusted his glasses and opened her original estate packet. "Your current setup has Ryan and Dana as primary heirs. Sophie comes in if one of them predeceases." Maggie gave a dry laugh. "Not anymore." Carl looked up. "I want both Ryan and Dana removed," she said clearly. "Entirely. No fallback clauses. No discretionary trusts. Nothing." "You're sure?" "I've never been sure." He didn't press, just pulled a fresh legal pad from the drawer. "I want Sophie to get the house, the savings, and the pension benefits. Everything else," Maggie paused, reaching into the binder's back pocket and sliding over a typed page, "goes to the local literacy programs in Armitage County. I already called them. They've got scholarship funds for adult learners and kids with no reading support at home." Carl scanned the page. Very specific. "I was a waitress for 18 years, then a bank clerk. I worked double shifts so Ryan could have braces and Dana could cheer. And neither of them has read a book in a decade." Carl scribbled a few notes. "We'll create a new trust with clear disbursement language. No loopholes." "Good." He tapped his pen once on the table. "You realize this may come with fallout." "I'm counting on it." Before Carl could ask what she meant, a knock sounded. Ellen poked her head in, raincoat still damp at the shoulders. "Sorry to crash the party," she said, grinning. "But someone's got to witness all this righteous fury." Carl chuckled. "I was going to call you anyway. Maggie needs 2 witnesses." Ellen stepped inside, holding up a zippered pouch. "Brought pens and popcorn. Let's sign some lives away." Maggie smirked, the first real smile of the morning. The process began, Carl dictating as he drafted the trust in plain, airtight language. Every asset was accounted for, every clause rewritten. Ryan's name vanished from document after document, like he was being erased from her future one keystroke at a time. Dana, too. It wasn't cruel, it was precise. "I should have done this years ago," Maggie murmured, watching Carl draft with quiet ferocity. "But I wanted to believe. If I just gave more, maybe they'd come around." Ellen's voice was soft but steady. "They didn't. And now you're done waiting." Maggie nodded. When it came time to sign, Carl slid the final packet toward her. "This locks it in," he said. "Once filed, it supersedes the old documents completely. Irrevocable." Maggie didn't hesitate. She signed in bold strokes, each letter a farewell. Ellen followed, then Carl's assistant, both names printed cleanly beneath the witness lines. Carl gathered the documents and stood to file the originals in the next room. Maggie remained seated, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the conference table. It was cool, solid, like the quiet inside her. Ellen leaned closer. "He's going to lose his damn mind." Maggie met her sister's eyes. "Good." Her phone buzzed. One new text, from Ryan. "Can you wire me $800 for the car? I'll pay you back next week." She didn't respond, just stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Then, slowly, she turned the phone face down. The box was older than it looked, scuffed metal edges dented on one side, and a dial lock that had stopped clicking years ago. Maggie kept it under the floorboards in the upstairs guest room, not because it was hidden, but because no one ever looked there anymore. Not even Ryan, when he still visited. She pulled it out just after sunrise, the house still wrapped in quiet. Her knees creaked as she knelt, but she didn't stop. Not now, not with the scent of lavender from the fresh sheets still lingering in the air, mixing with the faint metallic smell of paper and time. Inside the box, deeds, insurance copies, her parents' death certificates, and the warranty deed for the condo she'd bought back in 1994. The one she used to joke would be her escape hatch someday. She unfolded the condo title carefully, the creases cracking slightly as they gave way. The ownership was clear, Maggie L. Shaw, sole owner. But her eyes dropped to the emergency contact section, and there it was. A familiar name printed in blue ballpoint, Ryan D. Shaw, son. She stared at it for a long moment. That signature had been added after a minor surgery in 2007. The nurse had asked who to list in case of emergency, and she didn't even think. It had just been Ryan, her only son, the one she used to imagine would take care of things if she ever couldn't. She folded the page again, carefully but with none of the old gentleness, and slipped it into her cranberry binder. By 10:15, she was back in Carl's office. This time, they didn't talk about heirs. They talked about access. "I want to move the condo title into the new trust," Maggie said, her voice flat. "And I want the emergency contacts updated across all related filings, utility accounts, HOA, medical." Carl didn't blink. "Does Ryan know about any of this?" "He knows what he wants to know," she said. "That's usually money," Carl nodded. "You're allowed to list anyone you choose as emergency contact. It doesn't have to follow family logic." "I'm done with family logic." He slid a clean form across the table. "Who do you want to list?" Maggie didn't hesitate. "Ellen." Carl smiled faintly. "She'll be thrilled." Ellen was thrilled. When Maggie handed her the contact update form outside the county clerk's office, her sister let out a dry laugh. "So if you fall and break your hip, I'm the one who gets the call." "You already get the real calls," Maggie said. "Might as well get the legal ones." They filed the condo title change first. Carl had arranged the trust transfer documents in perfect order. Notarized, signed, filed electronically, and confirmed with a timestamp. The registry clerk handed her a stamped copy. "Congratulations, Ms. Shaw," she said. "Your property's officially in trust." Maggie took the paper gently. "That's what I wanted." She meant it. Not safety, not a backup plan, control. That night, Ryan called. She debated letting it ring out, but she was too curious, too ready. "Mags," he said, like they were old buddies sharing a beer. "Hey, I got a weird email from the HOA saying I'm no longer listed as your contact." "I updated it." "You updated it," he repeated. Like she'd just confessed to selling the house. "Why?" "Because I don't want you listed anymore." A pause. "I'm just trying to be prepared in case anything happens." "So am I," she said. Her voice was calm, measured. He let out a short, exasperated laugh. "Okay, well, you know I'm your son, right?" "I remember." He waited for something else. Maybe an apology. A backpedal. It didn't come. "I've always said I'd step up when the time came," he added. Maggie tilted her head. "The time came, and you stepped over." She ended the call, didn't slam the phone, didn't scream into the dark. She just walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. The moonlight hit the kitchen table, glinting off the binder left open to the tab labeled Property. Underneath it, the words, "Filed. October 4th, 2025. Trust transfer confirmed." The bank smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner, that sterile, polite scent of money being kept still. Maggie had never liked it, but this morning, the sound of the automatic doors opening felt like something cleansing. Final. She stepped up to the reception desk, binder tucked beneath her arm, the cranberry leather catching the morning light. The young associate greeted her with a tight smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" "I need to make a few adjustments to an investment account," Maggie said. They ushered her to a small office behind frosted glass, where the bank manager, a polished woman in her 50s named Joan Whitaker, rose from her chair to shake her hand. "Mrs. Shaw, good to see you again," she said. "You've been with us quite a while." "Too long, probably," Maggie replied, sitting. "But better late than never." Joan opened her system, fingers gliding across the keyboard. "You're referring to the Shaw Family Fund, correct?" "That's the one," Maggie said, her voice steady. "I'd like to close it." Joan paused, blinking once before recovering. "All of it?" "Yes." She expected questions. They didn't come. Joan just typed quietly, her practiced calm giving away that she'd seen everything. Divorces, deaths, betrayals wrapped in paperwork. "Will you be opening a new account for the transfer?" Maggie slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Yes, under this name." Joan adjusted her glasses, reading the heading aloud. "The Maggie L. Shaw Revocable Living Trust." Joan smiled faintly. "Very organized, retired accountant." Maggie smiled back, slow and sure, still practicing self-preservation. That earned a small laugh. "I'll need about 20 minutes to authorize the liquidation," Joan said. "Can I get you some coffee while you wait?" "I'm fine." While Joan stepped out, Maggie looked around the little office, the corporate art, The cheap plastic plant in the corner, the framed quote about financial wellness. It was all so ordinary. Yet this was where she was cutting the last visible tie Ryan had to her money. The fund had been created 15 years ago, when the kids were grown but not yet self-sufficient. It was meant to be family savings, for emergencies, future down payments, college for Sophie's kids someday. Ryan used it like an ATM for excuses. And every time she replenished it, she told herself she was buying peace. Peace had become expensive. When Joan returned, she handed over the printouts. Here are the closing statements. The full balance will transfer into your new trust account once you sign these authorization forms. Maggie skimmed the numbers, then she signed. Clean, unwavering strokes. No hesitation. By the time she stood to leave, the old account was a ghost in the system. Closed, archived, inaccessible. As she walked through the glass doors back into the cool October air, Ellen was waiting at the coffee shop across the street. 2 glasses of sparkling water on the table. Well, she asked. It's done, Maggie said, sitting. The family fund's gone. Ellen lifted her glass. To cutting liabilities. Maggie clinked hers gently. And reclaiming assets. They both laughed, short, sharp, honest. For once it wasn't nervous laughter. It was relief disguised as humor. Ryan's going to lose it, Ellen said, wiping her eyes. He'll think you've joined witness protection. I'm counting on it. The call came 2 days later. Saturday morning. Maggie was trimming the hydrangeas by the fence when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Ryan's name lit the screen. She let it ring twice before answering. Morning. Don't morning me, he snapped. What the hell happened to the fund? What fund? The family fund, he said, spitting the word like it tasted wrong. The one you said was for all of us? The account's gone. The bank says it's been liquidated. That's right. You didn't even tell me, you just... He exhaled sharply. You can't do that, Mom. Actually, she said, calm as the garden breeze, I can. It was under my name. Always was. I needed that for the car repair. I had plans. I noticed, she said. That's why I changed them. There was silence, a stunned, incredulous pause, the kind that comes when someone realizes a door they thought was theirs just locked from the inside. You're making a mistake, he said finally. You're not thinking straight. I've never thought straighter. Mags, Mom, come on, he said, his tone softening, slipping into that old rehearsed tenderness. I'm just trying to be prepared. She cut him off, voice barely above a whisper. So am I. He didn't reply. The line went dead after a click. Maggie slid the phone into her pocket, wiped her hands on her gardening gloves, and turned back to the hedge. Each snip of the shears was neat, clean, precise. The wire transfer confirmation popped up at 9:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. One clean click, and the first installment of Maggie's monthly education fund hit Sophie's account, automatic, recurring, and fully protected under her trust. Carl had made sure of that. She sat in the sunroom, the light pouring through the sheer curtains. Laptop balanced on her knees. The smell of fresh oranges drifted from the bowl beside her, something Sophie always asked for when she visited. Maggie made sure the house was stocked, even when she wasn't. The label on the account read, Sophie's future, private use only. No co-signers, no oversight. Just quiet reinforcement for the only one who hadn't taken her for granted. Maggie didn't bother telling Sophie. Not yet. Not until she'd finished putting everything in place. At the bottom of the screen, another tab blinked. A draft donation form. She clicked it open, adjusted the amount, and checked the anonymity box. Recipient: Willow Ridge Shelter, Community Programs Division. Memo: for transitional housing literacy classes. It wasn't a big number, but it was intentional. For years she'd told herself she didn't have enough to give until she was gone. Now she saw that wasn't true. She had more than enough, just not for the people who treated her love like a resource to be mined. Down the hall, Ellen's voice called out, Do you want this one in PDF or Word? PDF, Maggie replied, standing. Word feels unfinished. Ellen was cross-legged on the rug in the office, surrounded by scanned folders, a stack of signed notarizations, and an open flash drive plugged into her laptop. She wore her glasses too low on her nose and looked like she was having the time of her life. I swear, Ellen muttered, uploading another batch. If I didn't love you, I'd charge for this. You still can, Maggie said. The trust has admin expenses now. They both laughed. Maggie sat down beside her, pulling a folder labeled Healthcare Directives from the bin and flipping it open. She didn't feel burdened. She felt clear. Did you check the bank statements yet? Ellen asked. You should print a final ledger. I will, Maggie said, but not today. Today wasn't for checking up. It was for moving forward. Ryan's text came that afternoon. So I guess Sophie's the golden child now? Funny how fast loyalty shifts when money's involved. Maggie didn't respond. The next day, he sent another. At least be honest. You're playing favorites. That's what this is. She didn't answer that one either. She didn't need to. Ryan's messages weren't questions. They were tantrums in disguise. On Friday, a white envelope slid through her mail slot with Dana's spiky cursive on the front. No return address. Just the same sarcasm Dana had weaponized since high school. Inside, a dollar store birthday card, glitter peeling at the corners. On the front, a cartoon piggy bank with coins raining into it. Hope you're spending wisely, the inside read. Below, Dana had scrawled, maybe leave some scraps for the rest of us next time. Maggie smiled as she folded the card shut. Not tight, not with venom. Just enough to slide it into the recycling bin next to the fireplace. Then she poured herself a glass of sparkling cider, opened her email, and uploaded the final document to her cloud archive. A single folder labeled Legacy. Inside it, everything. Organized, clear, untouchable. Ellen walked in just as she clicked save. Still working, Maggie leaned back in her chair. Just finishing. You know, we should celebrate. Like actual grown-ups. Wine, pizza, no spreadsheets. I'm in, Maggie said, closing the laptop. Good, Ellen said, tossing her a set of coasters. And next week, I'm teaching you how to use biometric login so Ryan can't snoop around here like he used to. He won't, Maggie said, her tone cool again. He's starting to understand I'm not his storage unit anymore. Ellen raised her brow. You think he's really getting it? Maggie didn't answer. She walked to the hall closet, pulled out a shoebox filled with keys, old house keys, the condo spare, even the extra to the garage lock that Ryan always used without asking. She selected 2, one for her, one for Sophie. The rest she tossed into a Ziploc, zipped it tight, and dropped it in the junk drawer. Next to it, she placed a sticky note, do not reissue. The brunch invitation came with too many exclamation points. Let's just catch up, just the 4 of us, like old times. Dana's text had arrived at 8:03 a.m., followed by a suspiciously cheerful, Ryan's in town, and we figured, why not? Maggie knew exactly why. She replied with a single word. Sure. By noon, she regretted accepting. The Blue Heron Cafe sat in the middle of town, all whitewashed brick and overpriced omelets. Maggie arrived early, as always, and took the corner booth beneath the framed map of Long Island. She wore her light gray sweater and pearl earrings. Not for them, for herself. Sophie slid in beside her 10 minutes later, smelling faintly of coconut shampoo and hope. You good? She asked. I'm here. That was enough. Ryan and Dana walked in together, unannounced, too loud, like a coordinated attack. Ryan took the seat across from Maggie without so much as a greeting. Dana sat beside him, pulling off her sunglasses like it was a courtroom deposition. The waiter came and went, leaving behind a pot of coffee and 4 empty plates. Ryan leaned forward. So, been hearing some interesting things. Maggie didn't blink. You usually do. Dana rested her chin on her hand. We just thought it'd be nice to talk face to face. You've been hard to reach lately. I've been busy, Maggie said. Yeah, busy funneling money around, Ryan said, smiling like it was still a joke. We checked. The trust fund's closed. The condo paperwork's locked up, and the bank won't even talk to us about account access. Maggie took a slow sip of coffee. Because you're not on anything anymore, Dana laughed. Short, sharp, nervous. Why the secrecy, Mom? We're family. What are you hiding? Maggie set her cup down and reached calmly into her purse. Without a word, she tapped her phone and began recording. Screen face down. Microphone angled forward. Ryan noticed. What the hell is that? Just want to remember what gets said, she said, her voice almost kind. Since memory seems to be selective lately, Dana scoffed. Oh, come on. Is this supposed to scare us? No, Maggie said, folding her hands. Just keeping a record. Ryan's jaw tightened. You know what? Fine. Let's talk about records. Let's talk about you cutting your own kids out like we're strangers. Like we haven't been here for you for years. Sophie let out a sharp breath. When exactly were you here? Dana's eyes snapped to her. Excuse me. You can't just show up once a quarter and pretend you're involved, Sophie said. She didn't owe you anything. She owes us everything, Dana shot back. We built this life together. You borrowed this life, Sophie said, voice rising. You drained it. And now you're pissed she finally pulled the plug. Ryan turned to Maggie, voice low and venomous. You're making yourself a target, you know that? Maggie said nothing. Dana leaned in, her voice sharp. It's not like you'll be needing all this stuff much longer anyway. The table went still. Sophie stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. We're done. She looked at Maggie, eyes wide, wet but steady. You don't have to stay for this. Maggie met her gaze. I'm not. She reached down, retrieved her phone, and ended the recording with a single tap. Enjoy your brunch, she said. Ryan scoffed. Dana rolled her eyes, but they didn't stop her, and they didn't follow. Back home, the sun was already dipping low, casting gold across the kitchen tiles. Maggie plugged her phone into her laptop and opened the recording in Carl's secure Dropbox folder. File name. Meeting. The Blue Heron Porch. Aussichtstau 12. She typed a quick message. Carl, this is the conversation we discussed. Pay special attention to Dana's last comment. I'm done letting things slide. Let's go full protection mode. M. As she hit send, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Dana. Hope your new favorites help you when the time comes. We'll be just fine without you. Maggie didn't reply. Instead, she opened a new draft in her cloud folder titled Next Steps. At the top she typed, Restraining Order Options. Start with verbal threat documentation. The envelope was thick, certified mail, heavy with arrogance. Maggie didn't need to open it to know who it was from, but she did, calmly with scissors. Inside, 3 stapled pages, a court seal, and Ryan's name printed at the top in bold, entitled letters. Petition for emergency conservatorship. Claim, mental decline of parent, Maggie L. Shaw. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't quicken. Instead, she turned the page slowly, reading each sentence like it was a menu she'd already memorized. Erratic behavior consistent with cognitive decline. Sudden financial changes affecting family members. Unfit to manage property or personal affairs. He hadn't filed out of concern. He'd filed out of strategy, out of spite. She reached for her phone and called Carl. I figured this might be coming, he said after a long exhale. They're trying to push you into a corner. They should have measured it better, Maggie said. 1 week later, the courtroom smelled of old wood polish and forced civility. It wasn't a criminal trial, just a probate hearing, but the tension in the air made it feel bigger, like truth itself was on trial. Judge Marlene Price presided, stern, gray-eyed, mid-60s, and known for having no patience for theatrics. Maggie had seen her once before, years ago, during a friend's will dispute. She remembered thinking the woman looked like someone who didn't tolerate games. Carl stood at Maggie's left, steady as ever. Ellen sat in the row behind them, hands folded, spine straight. Ryan and Dana sat on the right side of the courtroom. Ryan wore a navy suit too tight at the shoulders. Dana wore her grievance-like perfume, thick, over-applied, and impossible to ignore. Ryan's attorney, some clipboard-holding ambulance chaser with overconfident hair gel, began the statement. My client believes Mrs. Shaw's recent financial decisions, sudden account closures, and removal of long-standing family beneficiaries are cause for concern. He only wants to ensure his mother's well-being. Carl didn't even look at him. When it was Carl's turn, he stepped forward slowly and laid a thick folder on the table. Your Honor, we submit documentation of Mrs. Shaw's recent trust restructuring, all legal, all reviewed by licensed professionals, as well as a signed statement from her physician confirming her mental clarity. Additionally, we are entering into evidence a recording. He clicked play on the laptop. Dana's voice rang out, bitter and unmistakable. It's not like you'll be needing all this stuff much longer anyway. Silence followed. Even the court reporter blinked. Carl let it breathe, then turned to the judge. There's no confusion here, Your Honor, just resentment. This petition isn't protective, it's predatory. Judge Price leaned back in her chair, fingertips steepled. And who is Ellen Hayes? Carl nodded toward the gallery. Ms. Shaw's sister, lifelong contact, trusted proxy. She's prepared an affidavit regarding Maggie's capacity and conduct over the past 5 years. Judge Price read it silently, then looked up. Ms. Hayes, do you stand by this statement? I do, Ellen said clearly, standing. Every word. Ryan shifted in his seat. Dana muttered something under her breath. The judge turned back to Maggie. Mrs. Shaw, do you wish to address the court? Maggie rose slowly. No theatrics, just gravity. I've made changes in my life, not out of confusion, out of clarity. I've spent years taking care of people who stopped taking care of me a long time ago. This petition doesn't scare me. It just proves I was right to start locking the doors. Judge Price studied her, then closed the file. Petition is denied, with prejudice. That means it cannot be refiled. And if I see another one of these wasting this court's time again, I'll be issuing sanctions, not advice. She turned to Ryan. Be careful what you wish for, Mr. Shaw. You may just get it. Gavel. Done. Outside, the autumn wind had picked up. Maggie walked slowly down the courthouse steps, coat buttoned tight. Carl stayed beside her, briefcase in hand. I've seen a lot of courtroom wins, he said, but that felt personal. It was, Maggie said. Ellen met them by the car, holding out a paper bag with 2 muffins and 2 travel mugs. Brunch, courthouse edition, she joked. I figured you wouldn't want to go back to Blue Heron. Maggie smirked. Not unless I'm there to burn it down. Carl chuckled. Before getting in the car, Maggie looked back once at the courthouse. Not out of sentiment, but something closer to closure. Ledger's clear, she said quietly. And then she got in, slammed the door shut, and never looked back. It started with a Facebook notification Maggie didn't recognize. Dana L. Shaw has tagged you in a post. She almost ignored it. But the preview line, some people lose their minds and their morals, froze her hand midair. She clicked. There it was. A 3-paragraph rant written in Dana's signature half-coherent fury. Public. Shared 47 times in an hour. I guess if you've got a lawyer on speed dial and a sister to prop you up, you can rewrite the truth however you want. It's sad watching someone deteriorate and push away the family who tried to help. Money changes people, even mothers. Enjoy your trust, Maggie. The rest of us have actual lives to live. There was a photo, too. An old one from Christmas, Maggie mid-laugh, unaware Dana had ever taken it. The caption underneath read, Before she lost her grip. Maggie felt her stomach tighten, not in embarrassment, but in recognition. Dana had never known how to fight quietly. This was her way of bleeding people in public. Within minutes, comments piled up. Some polite condolences, others nosy. Oh no, so sorry, Dana. Sending love. Aging is hard. Didn't know things were that bad. Wait, is that the Maggie Shaw from the library fundraiser? By nightfall, it wasn't just online. Neighbors slowed their cars when they passed her house. 2 of them didn't wave. The mailman avoided eye contact. Maggie didn't respond. She just took screenshots. Every line, every timestamp, every comment, and saved them in a folder labeled Evidence DLS Post. Then she emailed Carl. His reply came before dawn. From Carl Benson. Subject: Re-defamation material. Already drafting the cease and desist. She'll have 48 hours to remove it or face injunctive action. Sit tight. She did. By Friday afternoon, Dana's post was gone. Deleted without apology, without acknowledgement. But the silence after was louder than the outrage had been. The neighborhood had already chosen its version of the story. At the grocery store, Mrs. Callahan from 2 doors down offered a pity smile and whispered, How are you feeling these days, Maggie? Clear, Maggie said. You? The woman blinked, caught off guard, and turned her card away. That night, Sophie called. Mom, she said, voice thick with anger. I saw what Dana posted. I already commented to defend you, but... No, Maggie interrupted softly. Don't. Leave it alone. But people are talking. They always do, Maggie said. Let them. Sophie exhaled shakily. I don't want to be part of them. I blocked both of them today. Changed my last name back on social media. Just Leland now. Maggie felt something bloom. Not pride, not relief, but something purer. Self-protection reflected back at her. That's a good choice, she said. Feels strange. It'll feel right soon enough. The next morning, Carl arrived at the house with a manila envelope under his arm. Not hear about Dana, he said, as she opened the door. That's handled. I wanted to bring something else. He placed a single-page document on the kitchen table. The heading read, Will Addendum, Amendment Clause, NERPA 3. Carl adjusted his glasses. We can formalize it whenever you're ready. But I figured you'd want to see it first. Maggie read the single line of typed text beneath the heading. All assets, properties, and residual holdings shall transfer in full to beneficiary, Sophie Leland. No percentages, no contingencies, just one name. Maggie reached for a pen. Let's make it official. Carl smiled faintly. Didn't think you'd hesitate. I haven't yet, she said, signing in smooth practice strokes. He slid the paper back into the envelope and gave a small nod. That's that. Ellen stepped into the room from the hallway, mug in hand. She'd been listening. So the internet thinks you've lost your mind. Dana's playing martyr, and Ryan's probably punching drywall somewhere. Sounds about right, Maggie said. Ellen clinked her mug against the counter. They said you were almost done. Maggie looked out the window at the wide sunlit yard, the same place where Ryan once rode his bike, where she'd hung lights every Christmas, where quiet finally felt like peace instead of absence. Her reflection in the glass was steady. I'm just getting started. Ellen smiled. I'll drink to that. The email hit Ryan's inbox at 6:42 a.m. Subject line, Final Collections Action. Shaw Digital Services. Sender, Tri-West Recovery Group. He sat up in bed, rereading it 3 times like it would change. Attached was a spreadsheet of overdue accounts, bounced vendor checks, and a warning of potential litigation. His cash flow was gone. His second LLC, the one he started for consulting work, had just been flagged for tax review. He threw the phone against the pillow. 2 months ago, he'd still had options. Leverage, access. Now even the banks were calling him Mr. Shaw, like he was a stranger. He waited until 8:03 to call Maggie. She didn't pick up. He texted instead. I just need a bridge loan, $5K, just for the month. I'll pay it back, I swear. You said you wouldn't abandon family. Prove it. No reply, just read receipts. An hour later, the doorbell rang at Maggie's place. She didn't flinch when she saw him through the front window. Gray hoodie, phone in one hand, desperation barely masked. She opened the door, but only halfway. Mom, please, he said, breath shallow. I just need help. Her eyes didn't soften. The line of credit closed with your respect, she said. Ryan blinked. That's not fair. Neither was the conservatorship petition. Neither was the brunch ambush. Neither was the post Dana wrote while you stayed silent. I don't care what you didn't do, Ryan, she said calmly. I care what you tried to take. He stepped back, wounded pride collapsing into panic. So that's it? You're just letting me fall? No, she said. You jumped. I just stopped catching. She shut the door, slowly, quietly, then locked it. Across town, Dana stood in her bedroom, staring at a jewelry case that looked more sentimental than valuable. She opened it anyway, one piece at a time, the gold chain from her first promotion, the bracelet from college graduation, a sapphire ring she used to show off like a trust fund baby, into a small velvet pouch. She snapped a photo and texted a local pawnbroker she knew through an ex-boyfriend. All authentic. Need cash today. There was no reply. Just the ticking of the hallway clock and the growing silence of a life she couldn't monetize fast enough. That weekend, Maggie made up the guest room without saying a word. Clean linens, new towels, an extra toothbrush in the medicine cabinet. Sophie didn't need to ask if she could stay. She just showed up with 2 duffel bags and a tired smile. They didn't talk about the post, or the court hearing, or the text Maggie had never responded to. Instead, Sophie sat on the couch with her knees tucked up, mug in hand, and asked, "Can I stay for a while?" Maggie nodded. "You're already here. It wasn't a gesture. It was a line in the sand. That night, as Sophie unpacked in the soft yellow light of the guest room, Maggie opened the front closet and pulled down her cranberry binder. She laid it flat on the kitchen table and called Carl. "Everything's ready," she said. "I finalized the asset transfers," he replied. "The house, pension, investments, all retitled under the Leland Trust. No exposure, no fallback clauses, no legal cracks left for them to crawl through." Maggie took a long breath. "Thank you." "You want me to send a courtesy copy to Ryan or Dana?" he asked. "No," she said, her voice sharp as a closed safe. "Let them feel it when it's too late." She hung up and stood in the doorway, watching the light spill from Sophie's room. Soft, quiet, alive. This wasn't just about money anymore. It never really was. It was about control, legacy, protection, and peace. Ryan's new lawyer was younger, too young, too confident. The kind who thought charm could replace evidence. His name was Thomas Yarrow, and he wore expensive suits that didn't fit his posture yet. The petition landed on Carl's desk Monday morning. Formal contest of will and trust validity. Shaw versus Shaw, 2025. Filed in the same county, same courthouse, same judge. Carl chuckled when he saw it. He really doesn't learn, does he? Maggie was sitting across from him, cardigan draped neatly over her shoulders, coffee cooling beside her. "He's betting I'll get tired before he does." "You won't," she smiled. "You've met me." Carl flipped the document open. "The claim is boilerplate. Says your mental capacity was compromised by external influence. I assume the external influence is me." "And Ellen," Maggie said. "She's the puppet master this week." Carl leaned back, amused. "Then let's make a show of it." Courtroom 3B. Same judge, different tone. Judge Price didn't bother hiding her irritation. "Mr. Yarrow, we've been here before, haven't we?" "Your Honor," Yarrow said, puffing confidence. "New evidence has come to light suggesting the will amendments may have been executed under coercion." "From whom?" Judge Price asked. He hesitated. "Family members, with financial motivation." Carl stood, expression mild. "Your Honor, we anticipated this recycled nonsense. May I?" Judge Price nodded. Briefly. Carl placed a laptop on the evidence table and clicked to a folder titled Execution Verification, Shaw Estate. On screen appeared time-stamped footage. Maggie sitting calmly in Carl's office, reading each page aloud before signing, her voice clear, steady, uncoached. He let the clip play for 15 seconds, then pulled up a second file, digital notarization logs, GPS stamped from 2 separate devices. Then a third, Ellen's affidavit, video confirmed via secure server. Carl spoke evenly. Every signature was witnessed, recorded, and filed per statute. "We've provided authentication metadata and third-party verification. I've included the medical clearance from Dr. Klein, same as before." He turned to Ryan. "You may remember it from the last time you tried this." The courtroom went still. Ryan's jaw flexed. His new lawyer glanced down at his notes like they'd turned to sand. Carl didn't stop. "We're also submitting one more exhibit, Your Honor. The Notice of Fiduciary Compliance, confirming that all trust transfers were approved, executed, and finalized 6 months prior to this hearing. Meaning, even if the will were overturned, which it won't be, there would be no assets to contest." Judge Price's brow lifted. "No assets?" Carl smiled faintly. "Everything's already in motion elsewhere, legally and irrevocably." Judge Price shut the file, looked at Ryan, and sighed. "Mr. Shaw, there's a difference between persistence and harassment." Ryan shifted forward. "I'm just trying to get what's fair." "What's fair," Judge Price said sharply, "was decided months ago. Petition denied, again, with prejudice, again." Yarrow tried to protest. "Your Honor, Counselor," she interrupted. "You're lucky I'm not sanctioning you for frivolous filing." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "And Mr. Shaw, you'll be covering your mother's legal fees this time." Ryan froze. "What? You brought her back into court without cause. You pay for it. Gavel. Done." Outside, Carl adjusted his tie and handed Maggie a copy of the order. "You just got yourself an interest-bearing apology," he said. Ellen, leaning against the courthouse railing, grinned. "You turned an insult into income. Classic." Maggie folded the paper neatly into her purse. I'm getting good at that. They walked down the steps together. The air was crisp, bright, that kind of autumn sunlight that made everything look sharper, truer. When they reached the car, Maggie paused. Carl, when the reimbursement check clears, transfer it straight into Sophie's college fund. He nodded. All of it? All of it, she said. Let something good grow out of their noise. Carl smiled. Consider it planted. As they pulled away from the courthouse, Maggie looked out the window, at the flag above the steps, at the gray stone building where her son had tried twice to bury her under his own ambition. She didn't feel triumphant, just finished, for now. Her phone buzzed once in her bag. A new message. Unknown number. Unknown. This isn't over. She stared at the words for a long moment, then turned the phone face down against her lap. Outside, the light hit her reflection in the car window, composed, deliberate, and utterly unafraid. The official filing came through on a rainy Thursday. Petition for dissolution of marriage, filed by Dana L. Shaw. Cited grounds: irreconcilable differences and financial deceit. Maggie saw the headline first in the local court docket email, a notification Carl had set to alert for any further Shaw-related noise. She read it once, twice, then poured herself a cup of chamomile and moved on with her day. By the time it made the rounds through town, it was already gossip fodder. Did you hear? Dana left him, said he lied about everything, even his name on a car loan. His business went under, probably took her savings with it. Apparently, she had to call her own lawyer to find out how deep the debt went. Maggie didn't correct anyone. She didn't need to. That night, she opened her front door to find Ellen standing in the rain with a pie and a smirk. You hear the good news? Depends which part you mean, Maggie said, stepping aside to let her in. Ryan's selling his flat screen and 2 guitars on Facebook Marketplace. Dana's moved in with a yoga instructor in Westport. Maggie raised an eyebrow. She always did like flexible men. They both laughed, quietly, kindly. There was no joy in the wreckage, just a strange sort of peace that comes from distance. On Monday, Maggie returned to Willow Ridge Community Center, where she'd started volunteering every other week for their adult literacy program. She taught Wednesday evenings, soft-voiced men and women who sat with notebooks and patience and embarrassment worn like old coats. Don't go easy on me just 'cause I'm old, one of them joked as she handed him a worksheet. You're not old, she said. You're brave. The work was small, but it was pure. No contests, no filings, just people who wanted to grow, and a place where growth was the point. The program director caught her before she left. We've expanded 2 of the classes thanks to a private trust donation, covered books and bus vouchers. Maggie only nodded. She already knew. Carl had sent the paperwork directly, anonymous, as she requested. Later that week, Sophie came home from campus carrying an envelope and a bottle of grocery store champagne. Maggie met her in the kitchen. Sophie held out the envelope like it was made of glass. Read it. Maggie opened it slowly, carefully. The letter was short, a scholarship award notice from the State University's advancement office. Partially need-based, partially merit-based, partially funded by the Willow Ridge Endowment for Literacy and Access. Sophie was listed as the inaugural recipient. Her eyes welled. They didn't say it was from you, but I know. Maggie didn't speak. She just pulled her daughter into a long, quiet hug. They didn't toast. They didn't post about it. They just sat together and let the air soften. Carl visited the next day with a folder labeled Final Consolidations, Shaw Estate. All funds transferred, all accounts closed. Remaining assets are in the Leland Trust, and the shell accounts are dissolved. Nothing left with the Shaw name. Maggie flipped through the pages. Not rushed, not cold, just done. Carl tapped the final line. This, right here, this makes everything bulletproof. No one can reopen any of it. Maggie traced the edge of the signature box. Thank you, he stood. You've got more strength than most people I know. I've had more reasons. As he left, Ellen wandered in from the garden, dirt still on her gloves. Did I hear the last nail go into the legal coffin? Maggie closed the folder and smiled. Tighter than Fort Knox, Ellen grinned. Looks like retirement's finally fun. Maggie didn't answer. She just looked out the window. The front yard was quiet now. The mailbox unthreatening. her front door untouched. But her phone buzzed again, once, this time with an address, a location pin, sent from a number labeled simply R, just coordinates, nothing else. Ellen leaned over. "What the hell is that?" Maggie stared. "I don't know." The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of rain against the windows. Maggie had always loved nights like this, soft, uneventful, tucked in the kind of quiet that never needed to prove itself. She'd set her tea on the nightstand, the steam curling like ribbon, and slipped into bed with a book she'd read a dozen times. Halfway through the first chapter, she closed it. Her eyes lingered on the photo across the room, Sophie at 10, grinning, gap-toothed, holding a library card like a trophy. For the first time in years, Maggie's shoulders relaxed completely. No papers waiting, no hearings, no unfinished business. The phone buzzed once more on the dresser, an alert she didn't check, and then the world simply went still. When the morning light came through the curtains, it found her the way she'd always wanted to be remembered, calm, composed, and home. Sophie arrived just after 8, coffee in hand, planning to wake her mother for breakfast before class. She knocked twice, then again. "Mama?" No answer. The cup trembled in her hand as she pushed open the bedroom door. For a long second, the stillness looked like sleep. It took her another to understand. She sat beside the bed, fingers brushing the edge of the quilt Maggie had sewn when Sophie was 12. Beneath it, on the dresser, lay the cranberry binder. A yellow sticky note rested on top. "For you, start here." Inside, the tabs were neat and color-coded. Legal, letters, charities, closure. Every folder labeled, every form notarized, every document signed. Maggie's handwriting looped through the margins, short instructions, reminders, reassurances. Under letters, Sophie found one addressed in her mother's steady script. "You don't need to fix anything, Soph. It's all already fixed. Just keep learning, keep helping, and never let anyone convince you that calm means weak." Sophie pressed the page to her chest and cried. Not the loud kind, but the kind that breaks quietly, like something finishing its course. 2 days later, the reading took place at the courthouse. Same judge, same oak bench, same air that once carried Ryan's anger. Carl handled everything with the precision Maggie had paid for. Files in chronological order, her signature on every line, the estate folder sealed in gold tabs. Ryan arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses on despite the cloudy day, his posture rehearsed. Dana trailed behind him, eyes hollowed out, hair unwashed. Still clinging to a handbag she couldn't afford anymore. They sat apart from Sophie, who was flanked by Ellen and Carl. Judge Price entered and didn't bother with introductions. She opened the will as if it were an instruction manual. "This proceeding concerns the execution of the final testament of Maggie L. Shaw, also known as Maggie Leland," she said. Her tone was flat but not unkind. "All filings verified and certified." Ryan straightened, waiting for his name like a gambler clutching his last chip. Judge Price began to read. "To my children, Ryan David Shaw and Dana L. Shaw, no inheritance of any kind, monetary or otherwise. I leave you the opportunity to rebuild your character on your own terms. May you learn the value of earning what you keep." Dana's head jerked up. She can," Judge Price said, without looking up. Ryan's jaw tightened. The sunglasses came off. His eyes were red, but not from grief, from disbelief. Judge Price continued. "To my daughter, Sophie Leland, I leave full ownership of all assets under the Leland Trust, including residence, pension, and investment accounts. Additionally, she is to serve as director and lifetime overseer of the Willow Ridge Endowment for Literacy and Access." Sophie's breath caught. Her name everywhere, in print, in law, in permanence. Carl rested a steady hand on her shoulder. She meant every line. Judge Price closed the file. Execution complete, all provisions binding. Ryan half rose from his seat. "That's theft. She was manipulated." Price met his eyes. "Mr. Shaw, the only manipulation I've seen came from you. Sit down before I hold you in contempt of your mother's memory." He didn't move again. Outside, the courthouse steps were slick with rain. Carl opened his umbrella over Sophie as Ellen joined them. her expression a mix of pride and sorrow. She really thought of everything, Sophie whispered. She always did, Ellen said. You were her compass. Sophie looked down at the sealed envelope in her hands. Another note, smaller, labeled Final Deposit, Scholarship Fund. Ellen nudged her gently. Looks like retirement's finally fun. Sophie smiled through the tears. For her, it was peace. A sudden breeze caught the edges of the courthouse flag, snapping it hard against the mast. Somewhere behind them, Ryan's voice carried faintly through the air, half shout, half plea, but Sophie didn't turn. She just whispered the words her mother had written in the margin of one of those final letters. Ledger balanced. Lesson kept. Ryan stood at the front of the courtroom, fingers curled around the edge of the defendant's table like he could hold on to something that wasn't there. The hearing was short. A posthumous appeal filed too late and with too little substance. His new attorney didn't even bother to show. Judge Price did. She walked in with her robe billowing slightly, glasses already in hand, and the look of a woman who had read every page before sunrise. This is a hearing to review Mr. Ryan Shaw's motion to contest the enforcement of his late mother's will, she began, filed against the terms of a fully notarized trust and an ironclad no contest clause. She looked directly at Ryan. You're still chasing fairness, Mr. Shaw. Let me explain something. He shifted in his shoes, jaw tight. Fairness was years ago, she said. This is consequence. Silence followed. She read from her notes, voice clipped. The Leland Trust was executed legally, with oversight, medical verification, and multiple witnesses. You had 2 prior opportunities to challenge its validity. Both denied. Ryan's shoulders stiffened. You may not like the outcome, Mr. Shaw, but the outcome is not unjust. It is simply not yours. The gavel cracked once. Appeal denied. Motion dismissed. No contest clause stands. This court considers the matter closed. Permanently. Ryan didn't speak. He didn't have to. His eyes told the story of a man who'd spent years convincing himself that proximity was proof of entitlement, that blood meant balance sheets. He left without looking at Sophie. Dana didn't even bother to show. Her name still carried the faint stink of public scandal, her social accounts locked down, her phone disconnected. After the Facebook tirade, the court drama, and the divorce fallout, even the yoga instructor had stopped returning her calls. By now, she was just another name people lowered their voices to mention. Didn't she post something about elder abuse? I heard she pawned her grandmother's ring. She made herself the villain and expected flowers. Meanwhile, Sophie moved through the world differently now, lighter, not because things were easier, but because they were finally hers to carry. She met twice a month with the Willow Ridge Endowment Board, adjusting policies, approving class budgets, and meeting with scholarship applicants like they were family. Some of them cried. Some laughed. All of them left with hope and dignity intact. In Maggie's honor, Sophie added a new annual award to the program, the Margaret Leland First Chance Scholarship. Not second chances, first ones, because not everyone gets those without a fight. Carl helped finalize the fund's tax protections, of course, but Sophie handled the outreach, the writing, the vision. Ellen served as board chair, not just because she was Maggie's sister, but because she knew how to keep things clean, honest, and focused. She called meetings to order with a wooden gavel Maggie once used to crack walnuts during winter. Now it sat on a felt coaster labeled Policy Only. They ran the foundation like Maggie had run her life. No wasted energy, no second guessing, and absolutely no shortcuts. The article came out in the Long Island Chronicle 2 weeks after the trust's final audit. Ordinary Woman, Extraordinary Willpower, How Maggie Leland Protected Her Legacy and Paid It Forward. There was a photo of Maggie from the community center, eyes crinkled, hand on someone's shoulder, not posed, not curated, just true. It went semi-viral for a local piece. Teachers shared it, volunteers reposted. The Literacy Center saw a surge in applications and donations. The story wasn't just about revenge, it was about rebuilding the right way. That night, Sophie sat on the porch with Ellen, reading the article aloud as the sky softened into early dusk. Ellen smiled. She'd hate this attention. She'd love the effect. True, Sophie folded the paper, tucking it under her arm. They asked if I'd do a local radio segment, she said. Not about the inheritance, just the scholarship. You going to do it? Sophie nodded slowly. I think I want her name to stay in the light. Ellen leaned back in her chair. Good. Just remember, shine it in the right direction. They both looked out toward the garden. The light was golden now. A breeze danced through the maple trees Maggie had planted herself. But inside, tucked in Sophie's inbox, sat an anonymous email, blank body, no subject line, only an attachment, file name, ledger, open, dot. Zip. She hadn't clicked it yet. The memorial garden sat behind the Willow Ridge Community Center, tucked between a row of dogwoods and the gravel path that led to the literacy wing. It wasn't grand, no statues, no marble, just a bench, stone, smooth, deliberate. Carved into the backrest were 6 words. Balance to the end, MLS. Ellen sat there most Thursday mornings now, hands folded in her lap, thermos beside her. She didn't cry. She didn't have to. The air always carried a hum of Maggie in it. Quiet competence, dry wit, unshakable calm. Some mornings, students from the reading program passed by and nodded. They didn't always know who she was, but they paused just the same, the way you do when something sacred asks for respect without words. Sophie never did open the anonymous zip file. She'd stared at the email for days, her hand hovering over the mouse, until one evening she just deleted it. No backups, no archive. That was her line in the sand, her own version of control. Instead, she pressed forward. She taught night classes when instructors called out sick. She expanded the scholarship program to include rural applicants. She ran monthly first reader workshops for parents who were learning alongside their kids. One Wednesday, a woman named Deirdre, who'd spent her life as a house cleaner, stood after reading a sentence aloud in full for the first time. I didn't think I could still learn, she whispered, voice breaking. Sophie smiled. That's what the world hoped you'd believe. She caught herself saying things Maggie used to say, not in imitation, in instinct. Ryan moved to a town no one could pronounce in western New York. He didn't leave a forwarding address. Word got around that he was working part-time in a warehouse, renting a room above a convenience store. There was no announcement. No rage post. Just silence. The kind that follows someone who ran out of chances and ran out of people. Sophie never heard from him again. Dana remarried a man from Pennsylvania, a divorced orthodontist with a lakeside cabin and no interest in the Leland name. The wedding photos showed her in beige, smiling too hard, tagged by only 3 friends. She never brought up her mother's name, not in print, not in speech, not even when asked. Legacy, it seemed, was selective. The article about Maggie made its way into places she never would have imagined. Estate planning seminars, elder law conferences, even law school lectures. Not as a cautionary tale, but as a blueprint. Carl emailed Sophie a photo from one of the presentations, a slide titled The Leland Model, Autonomy, Strategy, and the Quiet Exit. Sophie printed it, framed it, and hung it in the nonprofit's back office, not for show, but as proof. People started calling Maggie a force, a case study, a movement. But to Sophie, she'd always be one thing, done right. It was spring when the center installed a new plaque at the garden's entrance. Sophie ran her fingers over the fresh lettering, in honor of Margaret Leland Shaw, who knew the weight of silence, the power of paper, and the value of getting the last word. She stood there as the morning sun stretched across the lawn. Ellen joined her quietly. You know she'd hate all this. She'd hate the fuss, Sophie said. But not the meaning, Ellen smiled. True. Sophie looked out at the small patch of green, the flowering trees Maggie never got to see bloom. She taught me the difference between being done and being finished. Ellen arched a brow. And which was she? Finished, Sophie said softly. Her way, her rules, her end. They stood in silence a moment longer, letting it settle, letting her settle. Then Sophie turned to leave, her hand brushing the top of the bench like a goodbye. She paused, took one last look, and whispered the final words her mother had written in the margins of her very first legal folder. My son said, "Why waste money on someone who's almost done?" So I wasted no time cutting them off.